The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the silence. No bird song, no rustling leaves, not even the faint hum of insects that usually permeated the air. Just nothing. I sat up in my sleeping bag, my heart already beginning to race. The silence felt oppressive, unnatural, wrong. I fumbled for my watch, squinting at the glowing display. 5:47 a.m. Dawn was just breaking, painting the inside of my tent with a sickly gray light. My name is Sarah Hawkins. I'm a wildlife photographer, and I've been camping in the Cascade Mountains for the past week, setting up camera traps in hopes of capturing some rare footage of the local fauna. Bears, cougars, maybe even a wolf pack if I'm lucky. But as I unzipped my tent and stepped out into the unnaturally still morning, I had a sinking feeling that I'd captured something else entirely. The air was thick with fog, limiting visibility to just a few yards in any direction. My campsite looked undisturbed, but something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "Stop it, Sarah," I chided myself. "You're letting your imagination run wild again." I'd struggled with anxiety for years, ever since my divorce. Being alone in the wilderness usually helped calm my nerves, but today it was having the opposite effect. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. Every sound or lack thereof set my teeth on edge. I forced myself to go through my morning routine. Boil water for coffee, choke down a granola bar, check my equipment. As I pulled out my laptop to review yesterday's footage, a chill ran down my spine. The memory card was corrupted. No, I muttered, trying various recovery software. Nothing worked. Hours of footage, gone. Just static and garbled data. With a frustrated sigh, I grabbed my pack and headed out to check the camera traps. Maybe I could salvage something from the onboard storage. As I hiked through the misty forest, the silence seemed to deepen. No squirrels chittered, no birds called. Even the crunch of leaves under my boots seemed muffled, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I reached the first camera and felt my blood run cold. The sturdy, waterproof casing was crumpled like a tin can, the lens shattered. It looked like it had been crushed by something incredibly strong. "What the hell?" I whispered, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. I quickly checked the other cameras. All destroyed, all in the same manner. Something had systematically hunted down and smashed every single one of my carefully placed traps. As I examined the wreckage of the last camera, I noticed something carved into the trunk of a nearby tree. At first I thought it was just random scratches, but as I looked closer I realized it was some kind of symbol. A crude, angular shape that sent a shiver down my spine. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, but the screen remained stubbornly black. Dead battery. Impossible. I charged it fully last night. The fog seemed to be getting thicker, tendrils of mist curling around my ankles like ghostly fingers. I needed to get back to camp, to call for help. Something was very, very wrong here. I started back, my pace quickening with every step. The trees loomed overhead, their branches reaching out like gnarled hands. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves sent my heart racing. About halfway back to my campsite, I saw it. Just for a moment, a dark shape moving through the trees. Massive, bipedal, gone in an instant. I ran. Branches whipped at my face as I tore through the underbrush, blind panic driving me forward. I burst into my campsite, gasping for air, my eyes wild. Nothing had changed. My tent stood undisturbed. The embers of last night's fire still glowed faintly. "Get a grip, Sarah," I muttered, trying to slow my breathing. "You're letting your imagination get the best of you again." But as I turned to enter my tent, I saw it. Another symbol, identical to the one I'd seen on the tree, scratched into the fabric of my tent. I stumbled backward. A scream caught in my throat. This was real. This was happening. With trembling hands, I grabbed my satellite phone, my last link to the outside world. I punched in the emergency number, praying for a connection. Nothing. Not even a dial tone. A twig snapped in the forest behind me. I whirled around, my eyes straining to penetrate the mist. Where, just at the edge of the clearing, a massive, dark shape, vaguely humanoid but wrong, too tall, too broad. Its outline seemed to shimmer and shift in the fog. For a long moment, we stared at each other. I couldn't make out any features in the gloom, but I could feel its gaze boring into me, studying me, assessing me. Then it moved. Fast. Impossibly fast for something so large. I dove into my tent, zipping it shut behind me as if the thin fabric could offer any protection. I huddled in my sleeping bag, every muscle tense, straining to hear any sound of approach. Nothing. Just that unnatural, smothering silence. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time seemed to lose all meaning as I lay there, my mind racing through all the possibilities. Bigfoot? Some undiscovered predator? Or was I simply losing my mind? As the light began to fade, I realized I had a choice to make. I could stay here paralyzed by fear, or I could try to make it back to civilization. With shaking hands, I packed up my essential gear. Food, water, first aid kit. I left the useless electronics behind. As full darkness fell, I stepped out of my tent. The forest was pitch black, the fog having dissipated somewhat. I clicked on my headlamp, wincing at how the beam seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. I took a deep breath and started walking. I knew it was a long trek back to my car, but I had to try. One foot in front of the other. Don't think about what might be lurking in the shadows. Don't think about the sounds you might be hearing just at the edge of perception. I'd gone perhaps a quarter mile when my headlamp flickered and died. I froze, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The darkness pressed in around me, absolute and suffocating. A twig snapped somewhere to my left, then another to my right. It was circling me. I broke into a run, blind in the darkness, branches scratching at my face and arms. I could hear it behind me now, heavy footfalls in the crack of breaking branches. Fast. So fast. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs felt like jelly. But it was always right behind me, hurting me, driving me deeper into the wilderness. Just as I felt my strength giving out, my foot caught on a root and I went down hard. I lay there, gasping for air, waiting for the end. Slowly, I became aware of a change in my surroundings. The ground beneath me felt different, smoother, colder. I sat up, blinking in confusion. I was no longer in the forest. I was sitting on a smooth stone floor in some kind of cave. Faint light filtered in from somewhere, just enough to make out my immediate surroundings. The walls were covered in those same angular symbols I'd seen before, glowing faintly with some inner light. And there at the back of the cave stood a massive stone throne. It was occupied. The figure that sat there was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Vaguely humanoid, yes, but twisted and alien in ways my mind struggled to comprehend. Its skin seemed to shift and ripple, as if it couldn't decide on a single form. Its eyes, if you could call them that, were deep, swirling vortexes that seemed to pull at my very soul. When it spoke, the words didn't come through my ears, but seemed to form directly in my mind. "Sarah Hawkins," it said, its mental voice a cacophony of whispers and screams. "We've been waiting for you." I tried to speak, but no words came out. My body felt frozen, pinned in place by the creature's gaze. "Your kind has grown too curious," it continued. "Too bold, pushing further into our domain with your machines and your cameras." Images flashed through my mind, centuries of hikers and explorers vanishing in these mountains, their disappearances blamed on accidents or animal attacks. All of them taken by this. "We've tolerated your presence," the being said. "But no more. You will be our messenger." Suddenly I could move again. I scrambled backward, my back hitting the cold stone wall of the cave. "What do you want from me?" I managed to stammer out. The creature rose from its throne, its form seeming to fill the entire cave. "You will return to your people. You will tell them of what you've seen, of what awaits those who venture too deep into our realm." But they'll never believe me," I protested weakly. The being's laugh was like grinding boulders. "Oh, they'll believe. We'll make sure of that." It reached out one massive, ever-shifting hand and touched my forehead. Pain exploded behind my eyes, and I screamed as knowledge poured into my mind. Secrets of the earth, of time, of dimensions beyond human comprehension. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the forest floor, the morning sun filtering through the trees above me. My clothes were torn and muddy, my body covered in scratches and bruises. I staggered to my feet, my head pounding with the weight of the knowledge that had been forced upon me. Somehow, I knew exactly where I was and how to get back to my car. As I stumbled through the woods, I tried to make sense of what had happened. Was it real? A hallucination brought on by fear and isolation, or something even stranger? But deep down, I knew the truth. The forest around me no longer felt like a place of natural beauty, but an alien realm fraught with hidden dangers. Every shadow seemed to hide watching eyes, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. I reached my car just as the sun was setting. As I fumbled for my keys, I caught my reflection in the window and gasped. My hair had turned stark white, and my eyes now swirled with the same otherworldly depths as the being in the cave. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling. I knew I had a task to complete, a warning to deliver. But who would believe me? How could I possibly convey the terror, the sheer alienness of what I'd experienced? As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my neighbors staring at me, their faces masks of shock and concern. News of my disappearance must have spread. I stepped out of the car on shaky legs and Mrs. Johnson from next door rushed over. "Sarah, oh my God, we've been so worried. You've been missing for over a month." A month. But I'd only been gone for a few days, hadn't I? I opened my mouth to respond, but instead of words, a sound emerged that made Mrs. Johnson stumble backward in terror. It was the language of the forest beings, a sound no human throat should be able to produce. As my neighbor ran screaming back to her house, I realized with growing horror that this was how it would be from now on. I was changed, marked, the messenger, carrying a warning that would drive people away from the deep woods and ancient mountains. I walked into my house and caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. For just a moment, my reflection shifted, showing not my human form, but a towering, shadowy figure with swirling vortexes for eyes. I am Sarah Hawkins, wildlife photographer. But I am also something else now, something ancient and terrible. And my work has only just begun.